2. All right, Jeep, you were a player. I can see the Princeton helmet behind you.
How about that?
Yeah, a coach. But I want to start, your dad. And you have a son who's at Oregon State right now, who played this year. What did you think about that? Because that's the other helmet behind you, isn't it?
Yes, we got a black Stanford and a Palo Alto High School helmet.
Oh, okay,
So,
I can't.
but believe it or not, the football was the one my dad intercepted, and the guy that threw it was McIntyre's dad. Threw it when he was playing at the University of Miami. So we've kind of got the generational
Wow.
bookshelf behind us. But yeah, first off, you feel fortunate when you grow up around football and you see it as an honorable profession. And then you would get advice when you were playing, whether it was backyard football or JV high school football. And then you feel fortunate when you go to play college, where I did at Princeton. And then my dad was busy coaching at the time, so sometimes he didn't always have a chance to watch me play. And then fast forward to 2 decades later, when your kids start to play the sport, first in the backyard and then simply playing catch. And then today I'm playing catch with both Keller and Jackson out here in Denver, just as they're staying in shape and working through the season. But such a weird and unique year
Yeah.
to be a football player and to be a football coach.
What was it like as a parent, though? Your son was there. Oregon State played all of its games, which not many teams did in the Pac.
So as we know, you're kind of at the start of spring ball when all this kind of came crushing down, and then you had the March Madness canceled, and it seemed like overnight most of the activities canceled, including in-person learning at Oregon State. So he came back here, and we had a lot of fun. They decided to train on their own. It was almost like pickup basketball, football style. Christian McCaffrey was back here in Denver, along with his brothers, which were Luke and Dylan and Max. And then Keller and Jackson were together. And then you'd have a collection of high school kids and college kids. And then a couple of Denver Broncos would come over, including Tim Patrick, the wide receiver. Emmanuel Sanders would come by. And so it was a really great mix of almost free form jazz, as Christian wanted to play quarterback, and Keller or Dylan decided to play wide receiver. And it was just kind of maybe the way football should be at its roots. And then you fast forward to, as we were talking, the way it went this fall. In order to play, you had to follow protocol. And fortunately for Oregon State, they played every game. That didn't mean that they were the cleanest program. They had their good running back test positive, and he missed a 2-week stretch of games. But at the end of the day, I give these kids so much credit. They want to play in college football games. They want to be in college. What we saw this year without fans, was competitive, but it wasn't the college football that we remembered maybe when you watched the 2020 Rose Bowl between Wisconsin and Oregon, or these other high-end games.
You said it, Jeep. That's what, and as someone who normally is there every week calling a game, this year didn't happen. But watching, I kept thinking of 2 things. One was the mental health fight and the benefits for those like your son and your others, Keller, your older son, who played, of course, at Stanford, to be able to play, and the jobs that came back in a real world case, right? Where we have tens of millions unemployed, the number of jobs that were either brought back or preserved because college football played.
It was great. And, you always worried, what's the worst case scenario? Could someone catch? Remember, that was probably the fulcrum was, is there a heart episode or a myocarditis or some type of issue that we're not aware of? And yet we went through this football season and we're at the end of it. Unlike forecasting at the beginning, we're at the end of it and we're saying, we missed some games, we missed some participation, but we had a season, and I thought it was exciting. And in the NFL, 256 games out of the 256 scheduled played, and guys had moments and memories from playing the sport.
Yeah. All right. I want to get pick your brain about quarterbacks in a minute and about this weekend's playoff stuff. But another thing I think is so right to talk to you about, because again, you are from an incredible football family. You've been a longtime NFL coach. Your bro is hanging in there at Wisconsin. Steve's brother, Paul, of course, is doing a great job as the head coach of the Badgers. I've been fascinated by a story that seems to have, I've read a bunch in the last week, and this is a horrible week in the coaching fraternity because too many guys lose jobs in the pro ranks. that there may be more eagerness or willingness of college coaches to jump to the NFL and more willingness of NFL teams to consider college coaches than we've seen in the past. I've read that narrative a lot in the last week and it's caught me. What do you think? Is there traction to that?
That's an excellent question, Ted. Like, that's why it's always fun to talk to you, because it's thought provoking. At first we thought that what happened in the NFL trickled down. So if Joe Montana is playing in a West Coast offense led by Bill Walsh, some of that would trickle down to the colleges and ultimately to the high school. What we're talking about is the exact opposite, something bubbling up, maybe the spread offense from high schools, or, is there something in the college game that can bubble up into the NFL? Or probably more specifically, if we have a spread trained quarterback who has success in high school and then plays at a big time program and has success in college, wouldn't it be upon us in our best interest to utilize those concepts or play the game that way? And I think that's where it's great to see in the NFL, because no one was more excited to see Chip Kelly come into Philadelphia than I was to see how will this translate. The hashes are different. It's more narrow. The speed discrepancy in college may be at a greater range or spectrum than everyone being fast in the NFL. And so are there great college coaches? Yeah, my brother's one of them. Is Fitz from Northwestern one of them? I think there's a lot of really good. We talked about Ryan Day being a good coach, but the real question I think has to be answered is that because the nature of the sport is trickling up and bubbling up, or is it coming down from the pro game? And yet the pro game, you want to have someone healthy and standing up for 16 weeks a year. You can't afford to have someone like Kyler Murray banged up, because that's their whole offense.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you, Geep, was exactly that point. You hit it. And even when I first started in the 49ers, which was my first real deep dive in the NFL, it was the same thing. Okay, you were part of this. I remember vividly walking on the practice field in Santa Clara the first day after the lockout ended in 2011. And Jim, you were probably there, but I remember Jim Harbaugh teaching a quarterback how to take a snap from center.
There's no doubt. We were just laughing the other day.
It was Kaepernick. He had never taken a snap from center.
We had played that game in December in a cold and rainy New England. We beat New England, the first team to do it at home in whatever it was, 14 or 15 years. Cap couldn't take the snap in that game. He finally put a glove on his left hand, not because it was his throwing hand, because it was the one that he was trapping the ball with, that he kept fumbling the center quarterback exchange. And so some of those early practices with these shotgun quarterbacks or pistol quarterbacks are ugly. And yet I noticed they had Jalen Hurts in the gun more than any other player in the NFL. That was one of the graphics from the Sunday night game. And I'm thinking that's, again, an example of something trickling up. If that's what he's comfortable doing, shouldn't that be what we're doing?
And that's what I was going to say to you, is that's the point. Was even 2011, 9 years ago, was we have to adapt him to the NFL.
Yes.
Is it now flipping to where we're saying, hey, look, this is what we're being given guys that have done nothing but spread passing leagues and 7-on-7 since they were 10 years old. And so therefore I'm going to go get Cliff Kingsbury and see if an air raid thing would work in the NFL and give him the quarterback that he hopefully can run it with in Murray.
I think that's what we're going to look forward to this weekend, because you got the Ravens, who set a record for rushing with Giro. They're not running a similar offense. They're running the same offense we did with Cap. Lamar's dynamic. He's done a nice job, because you've got to complement whatever they had, 350 or 400 yards rushing last weekend. You still got to throw the ball to win. And I think that they've proven that they can steamroll people in the regular season. Now that you have good on good competition, let's see how the Ravens do. The other team I find intriguing is the Indianapolis Colts, partly because they got Jonathan Taylor running for 1,100 yards. But Frank is trying to do the old school. We're going to play good defense. We're going to run the ball. And if I'm a Bills fan, they've had a phenomenal year. But that matchup with the Colts gets me a little nervous, because if they don't stop the run, if either team doesn't stop the run, it could be a low possession, one score game, which is what we like watching. Yeah. And that's playoff football. I don't expect the 45-43 game like maybe we've seen in the college football playoffs, but 17-14 or 21-17, is it 3 or 4? It's a one possession game. Those are interesting games.
All right, so let me go back. Let's finish this college point for a second. Do you think there's anything that what has been speculated, college coaches, because of the incredible change? Look, COVID has accelerated a lot of change. And we know, you know it well, the portal, the transfer portal is now here and it isn't going away. I don't believe it.
Yep.
And free
Yep.
agency is here in college
Yep.
football.
Yep.
It's here. That between that and the COVID seriously restrictions that college campuses are going to have to face far more than pros, that college coaches would be more willing to think, okay, maybe this isn't nirvana. Maybe I'll go. And if an NFL team calls, I'm going to answer. Does that make sense?
I think not only does it make sense, I think the guy that I'm watching is Fitz at Northwestern, because Fitz was hired as a head coach at 31, and we know it. He's had, I think, 3 10-win seasons at Northwestern, done a great job. He could stay there forever as a graduate of the school. I would keep him along as long as he would want to be there. Does he feel a little tug to say to himself, because he participated in the transfer portal with the transfer quarterback from Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers. Do you want to just deal with the new one, or is that Detroit job, or is that Atlanta job intriguing? And I think all coaches love, thinking of my brother, to be referred to as a developmental program. Kids come into our program and they get better. But if someone's one and done or constantly transferring away, then you're not that 4-year program. You're just playing the hand that's dealt you, and if the hand doesn't count, then you just fold it and wait for someone else to be dealt to you. So I think Fitz is an interesting one to watch, but I know that it's going to take a pretty good offer for him to walk away from it.
What about Brian Kelly?
First off, you got to give him a lot of credit, because there probably seem to be piled on a little bit because they haven't performed well, whatever they are, 0-6 or 0-7. They're in there, and it's still another great academic school. With my brother going to there with you, I think that they're always looking for an extra playmaker or two. But I still find it interesting that they're competing at a high level, and he's kept them there. I think he just had his 100th Notre Dame win. That's a hard seat when we know that being a head coach for certain programs carries a lot of responsibility. The head coaching seat at Notre Dame has always had a lot of weight to it, and sometimes the weight doesn't keep the people in the chair for as long as maybe he's had it. But do I see him as a college coach going to the NFL? I don't know if I see him maybe as much as someone like Fitz.
That's fascinating, Geep, because I've been asked this a lot by fellow alums in the last 2 weeks, and it comes in a couple of factors. If Brian Kelly comes back next year to coach, he will be the longest running coach at Notre Dame other than Rockne.
It's interesting. Yeah,
he would break.
Interesting.
Right now he's tied with Ara and Lou Holtz at 11 seasons. He'll also, if he goes back next year, he will pass Rockne to become the winningest coach in Notre Dame history.
How about that?
The winningest coach in Notre Dame history. That's something, okay? Yet people say, and I can't argue with this one, he's maxed out. What more can he do there?
Right.
Notre Dame can never treat football the way Alabama and Clemson treat football. It will never happen at Notre Dame.
And I think it's always the larger discussion about should we have more teams in the playoff, because you hate to have a superset of 4 or 5, the Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama superset that just continues to get more and more robust. And then the people just below it. I remember watching Wisconsin participate in the Big Ten championship game. They couldn't have played a better half when they were ahead 21-7 at Ohio State, but they had 2 inside linebackers hurt. And coming out for the second half, he said, "This is going to be a long 30 minutes."
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was, because there was just a lot of horses. I still laugh. Keller played his 5th year at Tennessee. It was so fortunate we played and had a bye week, so I could go watch the Tennessee-Alabama 3rd Saturday October game. When I came back, I said, Tua is overrated and everyone else on that roster is underrated. And now we look back, and of course they're going to have 4 number 1 draft picks just at the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
And Irv Smith was the 50th pick overall. Every one of their offensive line went drafted. And I'm like, that is such a talented team. But these robust super teams, be it Clemson or Alabama, who really can knock them off other than another super robust team?
Geep, this was actually, I was with you at the 49ers at the time. So this is one of the values of being at a game.
Oh,
This is back when Alabama. This is still the BCS era, so it's 2012 maybe. Alabama Notre Dame play for the championship in
yep, yes.
in Miami, 1-2. So
Manti Te'o. That's
right,
what I remember about that.
exactly. And Tyler Eifert was on Notre Dame.
Tyler Eifert.
Uh,
Yep.
gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. The big Lacey, Eddie Lacey
Yep. Yep. The big
for
running back.
Alabama.
So I meant Amari Cooper was the receiver for
Yeah.
Alabama.
So anyway, we're sitting in the stands. I go as a fan, and sitting in the stands, and Notre Dame comes running on the field first to start the game, and we're all shiny helmets in the blue and the gold, and everybody, you're proud, you're a proud alum. And then about 2 minutes later, Alabama runs out, and I remember I turned to my wife and I went, "Holy God, we look like the JV." It was like being at high school, and wait a minute, the JV team, we're not supposed to be here tonight. This is a
Yeah,
varsity.
we got this. Yeah.
Every guy was bigger than Notre Dame's. I mean, it was incredible. And that's an eye test that has nothing to do with football other than this. But that's where I go back to the point that that's never the way a school like Notre Dame, unless they completely abandon their mission, they will never treat football that way.
Nor should they. But you hope that maybe that recruiting class, like an Ian Book, that can play 30+ games, or like Stanford. I still think when they finished third in the nation, they lost the opener to Northwestern, but they had a hell of a recruiting class, and they all kind of matured together. They had the combination, which is hard to get, of quality quarterback play, dynamic players outside, and still good linemen on both sides of the ball. You still need to have control of the line of scrimmage in addition to making plays, and that's where let's face it. Fast forward, Mike Leach struggled this year in the SEC with the air raid. Now, LSU and Bo Pelini played man. We love it, but then starting with Kentucky, everyone else played a deep rush 3 drop 8 zone, and it was like, okay, that's now officially over.
Why? That's why this is the amount of big stuff the air raid offenses won. That's how much. But it's funny, and I'll end up on Notre Dame with this. My son-in-law actually said this to me very smartly when we were watching the games the other day. And look, Notre Dame's probably the number 5 program in the country right now in college football, which is phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
But the add-on is the gap to number 1, as we saw. It is huge. It's huge.
It's huge, and you have to almost laugh. There's a freshman linebacker I'm noticing at Alabama wearing number 31. He played LSU. He's supposed to be an edge rush guy. He dropped down into a 5 technique over the tackle at LSU and blew him into the backfield on 4th and 1. I'm like, that's ridiculous. This guy, I don't even know. I don't know where he's from, but Alabama has him, and he's just another emerging guy that your eye catches, and you say to yourself, he's just a rare player.
All right, so let's try to swing back now towards the pros. You referenced something that I think is great. You were part of an offense in San Francisco that was different.
Yes.
Heavy packages, fullback, downhill. We're going to play the game and run. And it's what Stanford did following that, and what David Shaw was able to, after Harbaugh started it there, David Shaw followed up for a long, long time, including when your son was the quarterback there. Now, Greg Roman, who you coached alongside, is running the show in Baltimore, as you said, very, very similar. My question is, will we see colleges and or NFL teams start to counter the pitch and catch, sideways, throw the ball sideways stuff? And somebody say, wait a minute, I'm going to bring back we're going to have a use check. We're going to have tight ends who block, not just receivers, not just tight ends that are receivers, but tight ends that can block and start to play the game downhill. Will we get a counter to what has happened?
You know what? I think about it almost school to school. So, for example, Steve Ono, our good friend, I think UCLA should come off the bus 8-4 every year, and I think they should run a pro-style offense, because I think they can recruit and find not just the tight end and the fullback, which is shorthand for saying we control the line of scrimmage, but find me a guard that's 300 pounds. Find me a tackle that can dance on a light bulb and pass protect from that, because you bring into not just the run and the pass, but the play action. And so I would say I'm very curious to watch, because I know Bill Musgrave, and I know he's a quality NFL coach that's gone to the colleges with Justin Wilcox. They both played and are good friends with each other as Oregon Ducks. They beat Oregon by running the ball this year. And I think that's what I enjoy about the sport, is that They don't hand you instructions with the football that you must move the ball like this. It's up to you to move the ball.
Right.
And I think that the decade plus run that Stanford had, it might have cost Andrew Luck the Heisman Trophy, but I think no one loved playing in the system more than Andrew. I heard
Absolutely.
a story that he's still watching and laughing and enjoys watching Baltimore, the Ravens, because he understands what the system is.
I can
And
tell
it's a
you,
way to
I pulled Andrew out of seclusion and spoke to him. I spoke to him about a month ago from parts unknown. And
yes.
yes, he is. And yes, he watches. And yes, he's enjoying.
And so I think that the formula for winning is still. I did a study before the draft and shared it with a couple of the NFL teams. The number one thing that helps you be successful is points per drive. It doesn't matter what offense you're running, and you just need to finish drives with 7 and maybe 3. And if we have 4 drives and we have a touchdown and a field goal in those 4 drives, that's 4 drives but only 10 points. You have more. And the good quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, the one year he played at Wisconsin, had almost 4 points per drive, which is phenomenal, higher than both RG3 and Andrew Luck coming out. And so that's a real good predictor, because it doesn't tell us, hey, you're Navy or an Army, you gotta run wishbone. Okay, move the ball down the field. And then the measurement of, I need to throw touchdown passes. Tom Brady has 43 touchdown passes. Well, he just didn't hand off from the 1-yard line. He might be throw it in from a 1-yard touchdown pass. So I think that quarterbacks that pride themselves, I see an Aaron Rodgers this year, just get the ball in the end zone. They've improved their running game, and I think that that's going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm assuming that Brady gets through the Redskins, and now we got Tom Brady going up to Lambeau to play a hot Green Bay team with Aaron Rodgers, who's really committed to running the ball, of all things, which I think ultimately makes you stronger as a thrower because you have the element of play action.
All right. I want to ask the quarterback whisperer this question. How is Brady at 43? And that we all understand had to adapt to a totally different mindset in terms of Arians and what he wants to do on offense. How does Brady do it at 43? No one's done it.
Well, first off, has he aged well? Yes, he has. Has he worked at aging well? If he's eating avocado ice cream, or you can just see at him that, no offense to Ben Roethlisberger, but he's just he's more of a grizzly bear.
Mm-hmm.
And he's getting up there in years, but I think Brady loves the challenge of the sport. And I did like watching the Facebook Live stuff that was put together on kind of Brady being Brady. And as much as you can say maybe he went down to Tom House and worked on his quarterback motion, or he's eating right and lifting right or taking care of his body. I think it's a combination of all of that, simply to be engaged in playing the sport of football to the best of his ability. And I think that he loves, the older he's gotten at it, the more his love of the game has not diminished in the least. And I think of Alex Smith in the similar way, that he had money, right? Alex had the money before we got to San Francisco. He just wanted to get better at playing football. Yeah. He wanted, and once we did this or did that, and we also sent him down to Townhouse because he had hurt his shoulder so bad, his throwing shoulder, that he started doing mechanics. Looked like he was pole vaulting. But that's what he wanted to do, and he got back to rotating a little bit more, maybe throwing it more natural. And I think for all these quarterbacks, the other thing that's helped, talking to Josh McCown, who's now 41 and still on a roster, I think that the rule changes. We bitch about it when a quarterback gets hit on a glancing blow and they call roughing the passer. I think these veteran quarterbacks know that they can't really get drilled like they can. And as a result, if I'm playing at 38, I can play at 41. If I'm playing at 41, I can play at 43. But part of that is that we've allowed the rules to really protect the pro quarterback. And I think that's a great thing because they're an engine that drives the sport.
And it's funny because Brady, way back, how many years ago, when Brady got rolled into in his leg?
Yes, first game of 2007.
Okay, that brought about a rule change, right? Because it cost that.
Now we can't hit below, and that gives them confidence to stand in the pocket. And again, I still say that a great NFL quarterback can throw from the pocket. That's his office. And you got people kind of coming in. No, right? We got Young from the Redskins saying he's going to come after Tom Brady. Give me Tom Brady. Well, that's going to be great, but good luck with that.
We'll come back to Brady in a second here. When you were talking about still playing, and I started thinking 40-41, the guy that has sort of gone a little bit under the radar this year is Brees.
Yes.
Where do you see Brees in that continuum? Can he continue?
First off, Drew doesn't have the same stature. When you walk down the field,
Right.
and by the way, every coach loves watching the other team warm up. But you would watch Brett Favre. He's wearing number 4, but you're like, that guy's a big guy with big hands. Troy Aikman was a single-digit quarterback, number 8. That's a big guy with big hands. Or Carson Palmer. You'd watch him throw these beautiful spirals. Or Vinny Testaverde. All these guys had a stature to them. Brees is just 6 foot, and he's kind of smaller and kind of right here doing this. But again, he's worked his way through injuries, multiple ribs injured, and he comes back because he loves the game so much. And so I thought that 2 years ago when they lost to the Rams, that he lost a little bit of his deep ball gunpowder, but really he's so competitive, and he's been in sync with Sean Payton, and the play calling has been so. You talk about the same thing they were doing to us in Candlestick in 2011 with Jimmy Graham. They're still doing.
Can you play in the NFL without the deep ball gunpowder?
No, and I think
that's why I was going to ask you that. That's what I think.
I loved watching Tua. Tua is great on the RPO, and Tua is great on this, but he has not been as successful getting the ball down the field. And I think that you need to use the width and the breadth of the field. A spread defense or a spread offense uses the width to kick it out early, but you still need the depth. And I still think that Tom's been throwing the ball. Brady's been throwing the ball great deep downfield. Guys like Aaron Rodgers have done a great job of throwing the ball down the field.
I'm sure you've thought about this too, but last Sunday, the night game when Washington won, and I saw the matchups, the first thing I thought, that's the Super Bowl that should have been.
Yes.
Geep knows what I'm talking about.
Yes.
2000, it would have been January of 2012 or February.
Yes.
It should have been the 49ers against the Patriots, and it would have been Alex against Brady. That's honest to God, Geep, that's the first thing I thought about.
No, and they've been good for so long. And of course, you play the sport, and every now and then it doesn't go chalk. You think of the NCAA basketball tournament, you think it's going to go, upsets everywhere. And we all pick out a bracket that we all fill it out, and then the 4 number ones make it, or 3 out of the 4 number ones make it. But I think that that was what was exciting to me about playing up in New England. But it was Cap, it wasn't Alex. And again, there's a long history with Brady being a Niners fan, and so I think in talking to some of the veterans within the building, because they didn't go with Brady, that swung the pendulum back to maybe Giovanni Carmazzi as opposed to Jim Druckenmiller, and so we have this reactionary pendulum that swings based on what's happened in the past.
But I just think you were part of it. I mean, that 2011 49ers team was spectacular.
Yes.
The defense was incredible. And unfortunately, one
right, and
off
most
special
Niner
teams
fans,
moment, and it cost you.
Kyle Williams stands in a lot of people's minds, and I remember thinking, as good a touchdown as Alex had hit to hit Vernon on the Vernon post, we had 2 touchdowns to Vernon in the Giants game. One down the right sideline that I thought, how did he not step out of bounds? And then we ran a double move, corner it up in the rain, and I thought, okay, we're going to win this thing. And then we actually recovered a fumble by Bradshaw on the 20. All we had to do was kneel 3 times and kick the field goal. They ruled forward progress, and I'm thinking, okay,
that was the worst. Oh gosh, I was talking about that over the weekend too, because that's when that was the moment we learned that's the out for the officials. You can't challenge.
You can't challenge it.
Forward progress. They use that as the out because that you're absolutely right. That was a fumble.
And I remember talking to Hockey League. He was working the game, who every year had always been voted the most liked referee and the most hated in the same poll. I said, Ed, you got to get this right. That's why we have replay.
That's
we
right.
Can't go. We ruled forward progress. I said, this is the NFC Championship game. Take 2 minutes and go under the hood, because I knew I'd watched, because it was on our sideline. The guy was trying to get forward progress, and when he moved up here to get forward progress, he didn't notice that the ball had already started to come out. I'm convinced to this day. And then we don't have to worry about Kyle misfielding the overtime punt, because we don't ever get to overtime. David Akers kicks a regulation field goal. The other thing I have to remind ourselves that was a lot of fun. Jim loved riding the bus. So we'd leave the Marriott and we'd ride the bus. And I remember that bus ride was one of the most unique bus rides because there was so much traffic going into Candlestick that we actually had to take the shoulder with a police escort. And when people were mad at the bus
Yeah.
passing them until they saw it was Jim sitting front and center, and then they started to honk and
Yeah.
and so great times, great memories. I remember Tom Rathman thinking Candlestick had never been more lively, and that was a good thing.
Coming from Tom Rathman, that's something. But so let's wrap this up by saying, because what Alex Smith, again, here's a guy you worked with closely, to see what he has done. I mean, one of the few athletes in pro football, you don't generally, in my world, you don't get as close to athletes as you do in some of the other team sports, just the structure of football. But Alex was an exception. And for the life of me, when you weren't there yet, the last game of 2010, which was a miserable year for the 49ers and was what created Harbaugh and Geep and Giro and all that. But Alex had gone through a bad time with other quarterbacks here. And I said goodbye to him. I thought he was going to go.
Wow.
As a free agent. I thought he'd just go someplace else and get things that so much history, blah, blah, blah. He comes back.
Yes.
He comes back. And your staff brilliantly worked with Alex to put together 13-3. It was 13-3, right?
13-3, and we had really the playoff thing sewn up. We were going for the first round bye, but we had the playoff sewn up. But I'll never forget remembering Alex, not just the throw to Vernon on the post, but he had to hit a deep crossing route to Vernon to get us down there. And that's as good a throw as you're going to see in the National Football League. And I always joked with Alex that he was like the officer who was confronting the bad guy, Snidely Whiplash, the cartoon bad guy with the bad mustache around the tree with the hostage. And whenever Alex would aim at something, he never wanted to hit the hostage because he never wanted to have the problem. So he'd always hit the tree instead of the bad guy. And then those two passes, his accuracy, his timing, his execution was so good. And to this day, I think that it proved to him before the accolades, before anyone else had an opinion. And when he came to the sidelines, everyone saw Vernon kind of collapse in Jim's hands. Alex came right to me and he was mad. He was like, we could have kicked the field goal and tied it up. I said, well, maybe we didn't want to tie it up. He was really mad that the call required him to make a nerve-wracking throw, but he hit Snidely Whiplash right between the eyes. He didn't hit the tree. He didn't hit the hostage. It was a great, and to this day, I think that those are kind of plays that give your career a boost. And we were sad to see him go, but we knew that he would be going in a good spot with Andy in Kansas City. Same thing happens with him. We actually chatted and had a great conversation. Mahomes' first start was week 17 against Denver, up in Denver, and I was there with family. And Alex went over and talked to Shelley and Keller and Jillian, who were there. And there's always a special connection for me with Alex because he turned the corner during that season and really specifically in that game. And he's still playing at a high level. He gets me nervous with that leg every now and then because he's already got everything in the bank, but he loves the game of football. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him play against Brady this wild card weekend.
Did he ever tell you the story, Alex, of the 2010 season when he stood up to Mike Singletary during a game? Did he ever tell you that story?
No, because he's too humble to tell me that.
Yeah.
Tell me it.
So I mean, he's saying, so this is we're talking about 2011, right? Your year.
Yes.
The year before, the 49ers started terribly, 0-5, I believe, playing a Sunday night game of Candlestick against the Eagles. And things aren't going well in the first half for multiple reasons. But somewhere in the second quarter of the game, I look down the sideline and the backup quarterback starts warming up. David Carr.
Wow.
David Carr was the backup at that time. With Troy Smith that year, but David Carr was the backup at this time. So David Carr is going in the game when the 49ers get the ball back. And then the next thing, I'm calling the game, but then I look down and I see Alex Smith pretty much in Mike Singletary's face.
Wow.
On the sideline. I mean, not in a violent way,
but in a passionate way.
But in a passionate way. Right. Good word. Thank you. 49ers get the ball back. Crowd's chanting for Carr. And Alex runs back on the field.
Wow.
The reason that happened, somebody went to Alex on the sideline and saw David Carr and said, hey, man, you got to go go tell coach, you got to stick up for yourself. This isn't on you. You're the guy. And so Alex did it. The guy that told him to do it, Vernon Davis.
Wow, how about that? Turnaround being fair play. Because when we put Vernon
True
Post
story. I
in,
mean, that's honest to God true story. And Alex went back in that game. We didn't win the game, but that was the moment he stood up for himself with the team. Yeah.
and I remember we had a preseason practice down at Candlestick, and we're doing pat and go, and I think they were booing Alex. I'm like, why are they booing Alex? What's up with Alex? There had already been a long history with expectations. The weight of expectation had been on Alex's shoulders, but he just wanted to get better at football, and that was one thing. We drank football like castor oil. We would up early and up late. We had a lot of plays and layers of plays. And I remember one time, because Jim had been doing it with Andrew, Jim had actually mispronounced and said, "Nice job, Andrew," in there, and it was to Alex. And he's like, I can't believe that Jim referred to me as his college quarterback. I said, "Don't worry about it. Andrew's a really good quarterback, Alex."
Yeah,
Then he was mad at me.
Exactly.
But that's what I remember, is that daily grind that Alex was willing to do. And then his waters ran so deep. And then the other funny story about that was actually that Saints game was a Saturday. So then we were waiting to see who our opponent was in the NFC Championship. We were thinking we were going to have to go to Lambeau, because the Packers were the number 1 seed. In fact, the Giants had that upset. That's why they came to Candlestick. But I went downstairs, kind of watching that game, seeing who we were going to game plan. I run into Alex. I said, "Alex, what are you doing down here?" He said, "Everybody's at my house and everyone's slapping me on the back. I'm getting sick of it. I came over here just to get away from it.
Yeah.
Can I borrow $20? I want to get a burger over at Carl Jr.'s." I said, "Sure, no problem." And so even in his highest moments, Alex had an ability to just get to the next play. And it's so thrilling to watch him play. He's comeback player of the year, comeback player of the decade. But at some point in time, he'll look back and say, "What was I thinking?"
Well, I'll punctuate by saying you hit on a terrific point there where you said Alex just wanted to get better at football. And that wasn't happening until 2011 when you and your fellow coaches came in. That's what was the difference. And that made Alex's career. I kept thinking, in fact, I told him this once, you're going to be Kerry Collins. So you're going to be a number 1 pick that didn't work with the first team, but you're going to go somewhere, wait a few years, get a chance and make it. And it turned out he got a second chance and made it, but it was with the same team.
When he came in for the first meeting, because we had the strike lockout, so we didn't even meet till August, I said, "The first thing I want you to write in your notebook is, this is going to be the greatest year of my life." And he put that down, and that was the optimism that we had about it. And then, of course, we went down to New Orleans and got absolutely blitzkrieged by Sean Payton, because Sean had called Jim to do the preseason. "Hey, here's what we're going to do, and we'll kind of cook the books together." And Jim said, "I will not kiss his ring. I will not call Sean Payton." So, of course, Dr. Heat, Greg Williams, brought the blitz in that first preseason game.
I remember that well. Yeah.
And so in the first round bye, Detroit was playing New Orleans. We would play the winner. We spent no time on Detroit. Said if Detroit upsets the Saints, we're winging it. But we spent the whole off, which is where Vernon Post came from, because we all said, "Hey, what plays work against the Saints?" And I said, as much man and as much heat as they play, if you get them knocked back on it, they will play 2 Tampa in the red zone, and the safety to the boundary will be 3 yards deep in the end zone. You can whistle a post in front of them. And then I remember making the call and walking all the way down to the other end. I said, "Please, please, please play 2 Tampa." So I was relieved they played 2 Tampa even before the ball was snapped.
Yeah. Best moment. It was great. You're awesome, man. I love doing this with you. Will you promise we'll do it again?
We need to do it again, Ted. It's an awful lot of fun. Let's stay in touch.